Welcome to the Personal Development Mastery Podcast. I'm Agi Keramidas and my mission is to inspire you to rise up, grow, stand out and take action towards the next level of your life. I interview leaders, influencers, entrepreneurs, authors, exceptional people who can and will inspire you to improve your life. Tune in for 2 episodes each week and make sure you subscribe to the podcast to get the episodes as soon as they are released. In today's show, it is my real joy to speak with Agi Sanders. Agi, you are a college professor who turned into a career coach, a staffing consultant, and a sought-after speaker. Having gone through 2 major career changes yourself, you have both expertise and experience. You focus on career path planning, and you have helped hundreds of people find their quote-unquote thing and create the life they've always wanted. Agi, I'm delighted to be having you on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me. I really am genuinely excited to be here today.
Fantastic. It's outstanding. Agi, I would like to start with some parts of your journey because, journey changes us into who we are, really. It's responsible for who we are. So you have gone through, you say, 2 major career changes in your path. So do you want to share 1 or 2 key defining moments of this journey or mindset shifts
Yeah, I'd love to. So yes, 2 major career changes. One was not by my choice and one was by my choice. So there's 2 very different outlooks on these. When I started, I had what, in America we call, our dream job, our dream career, which was also very much my identity. I was a college professor. It was who I was. It was how I was living my life. I was very proud of that title. It's one of the, nobler professions with some respect attached to it immediately, right? But it doesn't come with a paycheck. That I live in one of the most expensive cities in the world, born and raised, so that's not my fault. But it became to a point where I had to make a very, very, very tough decision. It was leave my family and my home to go somewhere else for a teaching position that would be, enough to help, that I'd be able to survive monetarily. Or I had to find something else. And I had to make the decision between my family, my friends, my community, my hometown that I love so much, or teaching. And I realized that I was still going to be me, even if I wasn't a professor. And my family was so much more important to me. My community was so much more important to me. So I made the very tough decision when I got to the point where I was having to decide whether to pay the electric bill or not. It was a choice, but it wasn't a choice, And so I decided that I had to move on, and it felt like a giant heartbreak. It felt like I had, was leaving a long-term relationship. It was very much me having to reconsider who I was as a person and redefine myself outside of that. And it took me a couple of years working little jobs here and there, trying to figure out, again, who I was, because it wasn't just my job. It had been my identity. And through a series of changes, I ended up working in recruiting and staffing and learning and development. And I really did enjoy it because I found that a lot of the reasons I love teaching, like helping people figure out what they're interested in, checking out the curiosity and fostering that, I was able to get that in my new position. But I felt that I was also tied to the people who were now paying me. I couldn't help people grow themselves as much as they wanted to if what was going to be best for them was to go work at a different company or to change what they were doing for their job or to go do something else completely, right? I had to kind of follow and toe the company line. So that's when I decided to leave corporate world and become a career coach. And that was tough for me. I don't come from an entrepreneurial background. I come from a very blue collar, my dad was a plumber. My mom was a secretary. Like leaving that and starting your own business was not normal. So I kind of just struck out and did it on my own. But it was all the things I loved about teaching. It was all the things I loved about learning and development and staffing. And I was able to make it my own thing. But it was a very different choice because it was one that I was actively making instead of reactively having to deal with. So
Mhm.
it has been a journey. And I realized it took me a while to get to this point, but I realized that there was this common red thread through everything, that no matter if I was teaching a 19-year-old student or helping a 45-year-old woman figure out what her next moves were in her career, I was always helping people figure out who they wanted to be and what they wanted to do and how they wanted to show up in the world. And once that clicked for me, it all sort of made sense. I was like, oh, I've always been doing the same thing. I've always been the same person. I'm still very much me. My identity has always been this, no matter what my job title. And once I really got that clear, so many things fell in place for me in my journey. And I really understood why I was doing what I was doing.
That's fantastic. Ibi, I want to discuss a bit further. You mentioned the topic of identity and how
Mm-hmm.
you had identified with your identity as a professor, which brings respect and so on. And I can
Mm-hmm.
relate personally, being a dentist as my
Mm-hmm.
profession.
Mm-hmm.
So I am very much aware of the identity as such. I want
Mm-hmm.
to ask you about what you said about detaching your identity as a person from your identity
Mm-hmm.
as a professor.
Yeah.
Can you tell me any struggles you had in changing your identity and how you overcame them?
Yeah. I didn't have the tools mentally to kind of distance myself. I couldn't sit there and look at it and say, okay, this is who I am, this is who I was, and who do I want to, and create a path for myself moving forward. It had just been something that I understood that I wanted to do and I had wanted to teach, and I had worked really hard to get there. So I hadn't even really put the planning into becoming that identity. It just snowballed into it. So when I was confronted with the idea of like, oh, that's not who I am anymore, I found the hardest part for me was when I would meet new people. My friends, my family, my community, they understood. They saw the whole progression. But meeting new people, I would find myself really struggling to not say, oh, I'm doing this right now, but I'm actually a professor.
Yeah.
Or, oh, I'm kind of doing in a midway thing. I'm trying to figure out. No, I wanted to tell them so much that I was, because it was just who I was. And I didn't know how to explain who I was outside of that. I had hung all of my, kind of pinpoints of who you are. I've hung all of that on a profession, which is a lot to ask of a job, even one that you love, even one that is well respected. I had just forced it to define me. And so I then had to spend quite a bit of time figuring out who I genuinely was. And that is when I started coming up with, okay, I've been interested in a lot of things. They're not career wise, but let me investigate them. And I did, in a way, take a step back, and it was a lot of it was to keep myself busy. But I started investigating my own interests outside of teaching and meeting new people to force myself to help other people define who I was, people who didn't know me when I was young or didn't know me when I was attempting to become a professor. And I allowed other people to help me understand myself. It was a real struggle. Like I said, I genuinely equate it to like going through a divorce when you have to go make some new friends and go find a new cafe to hang out at.
Yeah.
It felt very much like that. But I find that because the struggle was when I was meeting new people, how do I introduce myself? I realized that that was where I had to focus some attention and let new people in to better understand myself.
That's great. Let me ask you one more thing about these two career major
Mm-hmm.
career changes that you had. Obviously, you explained how they were. Was there any common elements in both of them?
There was. I kind of equate it to office hours when you're teaching. Students come to you, and it's very rarely about like, hey, I need help with a particular homework assignment. It's I'm having trouble with my roommates, and my boyfriend just left, and my parents are on my back, and I have to work, but I'm struggling with work and school. And I found that in corporate world, It was actually mostly the same. My office had a couch and it had a box of Kleenex for a reason. I became sort of like a therapist.
Right.
People came to me, because my role was to help them do the best they could in the positions they were in. But a lot of it came to my manager's upset with me, and my dog's getting old, and my kids are starting to go to school, and I'm really struggling. It was very rarely about role responsibilities. It was very rarely about particular problem solving issues with projects. It always was larger life, things that we view strangely as separate from our jobs. When, I've now come to understand it is all holistic. It is all the same thing. You have to work it all together to help it work. But I found that was very much the commonality between traditional teaching in front of a blackboard, working in corporate world and staffing and development, and in career coaching. It's basically helping people understand that their lives and their careers and what they do and who they are all intrinsically linked.
Absolutely, they are. So you help people now with figuring out, among other things, the path to a fulfilling career. And you say there is a path that leads to that. So do you want to expand on this for me?
Absolutely. So fulfilling and meaningful, I think, is different to every person, right? For some people, it's going to be saving the manatees and the trees. And for some people, it's going to be providing a secure life for their child. I start with everyone that they have to figure out what that is for themselves first. They have to define what meaningful, what success, however they want to term that, what that means for themselves. And the struggle there is trying to do that without letting societal factors, without letting familial obligations, without letting, community expectations, sort of unlearning a lot of the expectations put on you and defining that for yourself. And that's where most of my clients are struggling, because and I think we all do it, right? We work towards metrics that other people have put out there. Whether you're an entrepreneur, whether you're in corporate, whether you are, a stay-at-home parent, there's all these ideas out there of quote unquote success, of what meaningful means, but they're put out sort of arbitrarily by other people. And you will never be fulfilled. You will never find meaning if you're working towards someone else's idea of what that is.
Yeah.
So it's, for me, the first brick on this path has to be, well, what does it mean for you? How are you defining it? And then once you understand that, how do you as a person work towards what you've decided that you want and what you truly value? What is at your core?
Sure. Let me ask you something slightly different. And I'm referring to people who would like to make a career change because they are unfulfilled, but they have their fears, all those things that keep them to where they are. I'm sure you see that very often with what you do. So what is your take on this? How should someone approach this kind of fear of stepping into the unknown?
Yeah, and it is a big unknown, and the unknown is scary, right, for everyone. And yeah, fear is a huge, I don't want to say obstacle, because I think fear can actually be a good thing, because if you're afraid of something, it means you feel you've got something to lose, and it means you're excited about something else. If you didn't care, if you didn't care and put enough emotion in it to be afraid of it, it would mean nothing. So I really suggest that people examine what exactly they're afraid of. There's something in coaching, people will come across it all of the time, where people are afraid of being successful at something else because it changes who they are. It changes the problems that they have, and unknown problems are scarier than the problems you've already got, right? So for me and my clients, it's very much examining what specifically they're afraid of, and then understanding if, these obstacles are real. Are they physical? Is it, okay, well, if I change my job, I'm going to have to change my living situation. I'm going to have to learn how to pay more taxes in a different income bracket. Is it a real obstacle, or is it a story? Is it a fear that our brains are creating? Right? Because when our brains, which crave novelty, if they don't know what's going on, they will write a story, and we can become, sort of blocked by things we're making up in ourselves, ideas that don't actually exist in the real world, quote unquote. So the figuring out if it's, a real obstacle, a real pothole that you need to brainstorm your way around, or if it is something that you are creating, a story that you have decided is real. And once my clients start getting into the, like, okay, you write it out on paper and you put it all out there and you talk about worst case scenarios, they start to realize fairly quickly, usually, that they are just creating a list of excuses for themselves because it is unknown. And they then, when they see it out there, and they can start taking the baby steps. And I'm a huge believer that baby steps are the biggest steps, but it starts with really understanding that fear is okay, and that looking at it and deciding, are some of these aspects real or are they imaginary, and tackling it as if it was, a problem to be solved critically.
I think that's a great piece of advice, because fear is general, but really realizing what exactly are you afraid of, and being clear on that leads to a different approach on how you can deal with it, because you know exactly what it is, and you can predict or anticipate anyway some challenges that will appear along the way.
Absolutely. And, they can be so multitudinous. Someone can be afraid of, well, I want to change my career into something that my old college friends are going to laugh at me about. And, and it's once they get that on paper, they generally realize, like, oh my gosh, that's something that like a 12-year-old should be worrying about, not a grown person. And then they realize, okay, but all those college friends who'd be making fun of me that hate their jobs are unhappy. Like, why would I be worried about, them laughing at me? And some of them are very, real of, I'm going outside what my community expects of me. I'm going outside what my family expects of me. And there is, fear about disappointing other people, about having to learn how your identity will change, and understanding that you're still going to be you, but your people will view you differently. That's, those are very real fears. And yes, they can be examined. And yes, fear is very general, but once you do understand exactly what your fears are and where they're coming from, and realizing that most of them have been installed sort of at the factory. We all have an operating system that our community and our families have created in us. And once we understand that we're operating from there, we can, like you said, work from that.
That's fantastic. Ibi, let me ask you one more thing regarding career, and that's something that intrigued me when I was reading about something. You're being a career coach. You say that when you expect your career to fulfill your emotional needs, that is a problem. You put too much expectation. So that's coming from someone who helps people find their ideal career. Sounds maybe a little bit maybe not controversial, but certainly something that requires a bit more explanation from your part.
Absolutely. We have this idea, and it is fairly new idea, right? That you should follow your passion, that your passion should be the thing where you live your life and make your money, and it does all of the things. And I'm not saying that people shouldn't have all-consuming passions, but I don't believe that you have to make that your career. I think that can suck a lot of the passion out of things. I think it puts a lot of pressure on the thing that you love, then to not just bring you enjoyment, not just stimulate your brain, not just, be fun, but it has a purpose, it has a job, it has a reason for being. It now takes on all of these other roles that maybe it's not meant to. Some people are really, really lucky. Their passion, the thing they want to do, does fulfill all those things for them, and they're perfect. And that's great. More power to them. But to expect that, I think, is unfair. To say, if you love art and art is your favorite thing in the world, well, obviously you should go be an artist. Well, that's not going to work for everyone. That's going to, for some people, they love the fact that it's a weekend thing that they just get to do for its own sake. And if you put all of your expectations on your burning passion to become your career, it's going to fall short. it's the same as with a relationship. You can't, as much as you love someone and they love you, put every hope, dream, wish, monetary, familial expectation on one human being. It is too much. Now, in the same way with a career, can you go towards a career that fulfills your personal values, that supports your common ideals and priorities, and that you find meaning in? Absolutely. You can still do that without it being your passion. That's why I use the term finding your thing, because your thing is a bit different. It's something that's easy for you, that you do find meaning in, that does fulfill, your long-term monetary goals and family goals, and allows you to do work you're proud of. But it doesn't have to be that all-consuming, burning, one and only passion, because frankly, a lot of people don't have that. So to expect that they have to not only have that and then create their career based on it, that's a lot of pressure on the person and on the passion.
Absolutely, I can relate to that, and it's a big realization for someone to understand that the passion and the profession can be different. And
Mm-hmm.
I like the word vocation in this
Yes.
sense, because your vocation usually, or for many people, identifies with their profession, but not always.
Mm-hmm.
Your vocation can
Mm-hmm.
be something else.
Mm-hmm.
And as you were saying, to really force that into being a profession in terms of monetary income
Mm-hmm.
does not work, and it puts a lot of pressure on it, and you may just give up on it because you love doing it, but it's not making any
Mm-hmm.
money. But that's really not the primary point, is it?
Abs-
It's important to.
it's, yeah, absolutely. And your your passion might not actually always fulfill your values as a human,
Yeah.
right? If you really think the environment is a burning passion of yours, but also, you're really into creating, DIY projects that create a lot of waste, those don't work together, right? So your thing can absolutely support your values and priorities. And I believe that it has to. Anything that you're going to build your life on in terms of creating security for yourself and your family has to support your values and priorities, and your values and priorities have to support it. But your passion can live on the side. You can incorporate aspects of your all consuming burning passion into your daily vocation, but it doesn't have to be the whole thing, right? So maybe you are a dentist who absolutely loves art, but you're not going to be an artist. Maybe my dentist has an entire gallery wall in her office of local artists because she loves art.
Yeah.
Small businesses are also very much important to her. So she has the most beautiful office. It's like walking into an art gallery, because that's how she's combining them. She's not spending her days as her burning passion being an art collector. She's a great dentist. I'm really glad that she's understood the difference. But she's found a way to, bring some aspects of her passion into her vocation. And I think that's really important as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. Ibi, tell me, you talk about meaningful work coming from
Mm-hmm.
developing your authentic self, and
Yeah.
I agree with you completely. I feel that you can certainly not achieve excellence unless you're really
Mm-hmm.
passionate about something. You can kind of
Mm-hmm.
be okay,
Mm-hmm.
but you can never be exceptional. So
Oh,
I would like your thoughts on this.
yeah, I love the word exceptional because I think excellent people are like, oh, that's just really good. But I think exceptional just has this idea of it is above and beyond all of the things.
Yeah.
And yeah, and I don't think you can do an excellent job or, achieve this pinnacle unless you are doing things that are true to who you are. And and there's so much out there about just sort of living in your spirit of who you are as a person. But I think the expectation is that you know who that is. And I think for a lot of people, they struggle to really understand who they are, what their identity even is outside of all of these external factors, right? And so I think it's really important before you make any decisions in terms of career, whether you make any decisions in terms of your larger identity and how you present yourself to the world, is to understand who you are at your core, and then to allow yourself to lean into that and to make all of your decisions based on your you-ness is the best word that I have for this. Leaning into the most you version of you and not being apologetic about it. Actually being very proud of who you are and understanding who you are and knowing why you're making decisions the way that you're making them. Because as soon as you allow yourself to do work in the most you way possible, that's where you can achieve those levels that you will never achieve if you're trying to, again, fulfill someone else's metrics, someone else's definition of success. And I find that people in the workplace, really good leaders especially, let people do that. They let them lean into their strengths. They let them do the work that allows them to be the most you, and they let them do it in the most them way possible. And they just excel because they're solving problems in a way that other people aren't going to think about, right? And they're doing it in a way that's intrinsically them, that they just understand, that it's second nature to them. And it's hard to quantify. There tend to be soft skills, right? But I find that if you take the time to understand who you are and why you make the decisions that you make, you can find those areas where you'll excel, and you can create this existence, this identity that you want. But it does require intentionality. You do have to understand why you're doing those things.
Absolutely. And you mentioned the word identity again, over and over again, because it's right at the core of it. And there was something that you were saying, it brought to mind, and it's going to be a little bit philosophical now. It reminded me of those two words in the oracle in ancient Greece, know thyself, which is, I mean, from ancient times, that was probably the most important piece of knowledge for humans, and we're still, after 2,500 years, we're still struggling with looking inside and figuring out who we are.
Right. And there's no shame in that, right? Like clearly the ancient Greeks felt the need that they had to tell you to know thyself because people were struggling with it then, right? So it's something we still struggle with because there are always outside forces. The ideas of what success is, of you being an exceptional human being, of you doing all things, those culturally change throughout time, but that force is always there. And so I think this struggle has always been there of knowing who you are and what you want versus what your society tells you you should want. And I think, as media has proliferated exponentially in the last 20 years or so, it's becoming more difficult. You're getting more messages on a daily basis of who you're supposed to be, what you're supposed to look like, what you're supposed to desire. And so the ancient Greeks knew this is going to be a struggle for you. Yeah, let's look back and remind ourselves of that really, really important concept of, knowing who you are and allowing yourself to be that person. Knowing who you are, but not doing anything with it, still, following what society tells you have to do. It's kind of a wash at that point. It's the allowing yourself to be that person.
Ibi, on your own journey of knowing who you are, what's one most important tool that has allowed you to dig deeper and uncover something that you were maybe surprised to find?
I think it sounds maybe overly simplistic, but I found that for me, it really works. And it is something I've started to do with my clients because I realized, it works, is really taking a moment to separate myself, whatever that means. If it means I need to leave the home, if it means I need to find a quiet space, allowing myself the mental space to visualize sort of future me, like 2 years down the road, not 5, not 10, not 20, something in a world where I can truly understand. Visualizing myself 2 years from the moment and just visualizing what I'm doing, what I'm seeing, smelling, touching. What is it that I'm planning on doing with my day? And down to everything from like, what time is my alarm clock going off to what am I doing with, maybe it's a paycheck that I'm cashing. Really just allowing myself to visualize myself 2 years from this moment what, and really going deep with all of your senses, all of the senses that you possess, your taste, touch, smell, and then asking myself, okay, future me, 2-year future me is waiting for me.
Mm-hmm.
What do I need to do to get there? And who do I want to be when I meet her? And it being myself and not another expectation, not of, oh, well, in my business, I want to make X amount of dollars because this entrepreneurial guru told me that's what success will be in 2 years. No, no, it's me. What do I want to do for myself to meet me at that space at that time? And 9 times out of 10, and I do this fairly frequently to check in to make sure it's still, the compass is still aiming in the same direction. It's the reason I'm doing anything in that visualization is always coming down to the same things. And for me, they tend to be about family, about happiness and health, and about fun and ease, allowing myself to, do things with a sense of fun and ease and curiosity and enjoyment and play. And it looks a little different each time. But once I know those core reasons I'm doing anything, I can then work back and say, okay, why do I want those things? Who am I now in that 2-year version for me? And again, it doesn't, and that's how I know they're like my pillars, because it doesn't seem to change for me. But yeah, I have clients go through this visualization, and once they realize, oh, it's just a future version of me that I'm working towards, they realize that they can let go of so many other people's expectations. There's no one else waiting for them at that mark. It is just themselves. And I've found this to be a really powerful tool.
I'm fascinated by visualization techniques that different people tell me. So I wanted to ask, you say you get a mental space to do that. And you said you do it frequently. Can you explain what does frequently mean? Is it every day, multiple times
No,
a day?
no, not even quite that frequently.
All
I
right.
wish I had that sort of mental space. I have attempted to implement meditation space into my schedule quite often, but I am not a person that can sit still and do that very often.
Okay.
I know that about myself. No, I do this, I would say maybe once a month.
Oh.
Maybe, yeah. So for me, that is frequent, right? To do that check-in. But I think I did do it, similar types of things. Like I said, lots of meditations when I was truly trying to figure out what I wanted, what direction I wanted to go. And that did help me start to understand. And again, once I've really settled in on what my kind of core is, and it isn't changing as often as it maybe had when I was changing more often. For me, frequency is, about once a month. I know people who are like just, a few times a year, or they just want to do it at the beginning of a year, at the end of a year. I find that whatever works for you. And I find that there's a lot of pressure for people to, oh, well, write it down in a journal. Like I can't, like journaling, getting it out like that doesn't help me. Talking it out. So if that means, I put like a recording on my phone or on my computer, I open up a document and hit the microphone and speak to it. Or I find for me, the best scenario is I take my dog and I go on a walk with no destination.
Okay.
And just allow myself to be in my head and allow myself to just let the mind wander. And again, let myself say, okay, if I was doing this activity in 2 years, what does this look like? And that I have found really works for me. But everyone is so different. I think you do need to just find what works for you. Some people, want to do it in a collage or a painting, whatever you need to do it that way. That's going to help you figure out who you are and how you do things. Do it in the most you way. Start there, leaning into your you-ness.
I was asking you about this particular one because I find personally that visualization is as extremely powerful as it is as a technique. Sometimes I lack the consistency to do it often. So there is that vision of, as you were saying, myself in 2 years. And then it kind of gets forgotten because I don't practice that particular thought of myself in the future often enough. That's why I was asking you whether you do it frequently or not.
For me, yeah, that is the frequency that works. I
Okay.
was for a while doing a process where I would do it daily. where I sat with myself and had sort of the big visualization, and I went through, okay, what am I seeing, hearing, touching, tasting? And
Right.
I wrote it all down. I said, okay, well, what is this ideal me 2 years from, now? What is this day? What am I doing? And I wrote it all down in the journal that I use to plan my day every day.
Okay.
And I would start every morning with, okay, what does my best day look like today? What is one thing I can do to get me to that 2 year from now point? And what is, of all of the things I do today, how can I incorporate that day now? And that became very important to me, not waiting for 2 years, but how can I bring that 2 years into now? And I was doing that daily. But it's become sort of second nature for me now that I don't need to do it daily anymore. But I really enjoyed that, really just having the big kind of sit with myself moment, and then every day just sort of checking in and saying, oh, organizing my day that way. And I found it a really nice way to organize my day. It felt like my day had a purpose other than just ticking to-do boxes. And I really did like that, but I've gotten to the point where I don't need it daily anymore. But there was that point. Yeah.
No, I was kind of expecting that you would say that you, after doing it over and over again, it kind of integrated as a
Hmm.
habit that you don't think about much.
Yeah. 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 And it really has just become part of who I am. It's not a question of what's that ideal fictional kind of idea of me. It's like, oh no, I'm going to be that person. It has become very much more real to me and how I live my life. It's not a visualization for the most part anymore. A few things will change. I did sort of one with a friend at the beginning of the year to kind of organize our years and what we wanted, and nothing really changed, except for clearly because of everything that's going on in my visualization. I was not in my home space. I was traveling. I was around other people, but that clearly was a reaction to the times that we're dealing with. But other than that, yeah, it's become so much of who I am and how I'm living my daily life that yeah, it's integrated. I like that word.
No, I'll just mention that, and then I will leave this to whole topic of visualization. That once this practice, of having some thoughts in your head, even if they last only a few seconds. I mean, you're doing something, you're washing the dishes, and you think for a few moments about yourself in the future versus doing the dishes and thinking about what's for lunch tomorrow or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So it becomes a mental habit, a mental practice of,
Mm-hmm.
while not really consciously doing something. I mean, what you said about walking the dog, that's beautiful, and you can take that, or running or something like
Mm-hmm.
that. It's time for ourselves, but still we need to discipline ourselves
Mm-hmm.
to think about these things that we want, rather than
Yeah.
allowing the mind completely to wander on things that probably won't benefit us at all. So that was really my point in
Yeah.
saying that.
Yeah, and absolutely. And I actually tell my clients to pay attention to those moments because we do that all the time. Our brains, yes, they'll be wandering and we're doing the dishes. And it's funny because I always use you doing the dishes as an example. Your mind is wandering, but it will at one point be like, oh, wouldn't it be interesting if? And it'll be something that very much pertains to you. So I tell my clients to pay attention to those moments when your brain is already doing the thing. If you're washing the dishes, you're like, oh, wouldn't it be amazing if someone got paid to do dot, dot, dot? That dot 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 is where the magic is, and just paying attention to those little moments and being aware of when your brain is in the moment of, hey, let's think about possibilities, let's think about who we want to be, and just becoming aware of those moments. I find that it's uh, invaluable if you can gain the awareness of, oh, my brain's trying to work out this problem right now.
It's one of the biggest awarenesses that one can have, I think.
Yep.
Maybe this is a really fascinating conversation, and I'm enjoying it very much. I would like to also ask you some quick fire questions.
Oh, hit me.
So my first one always is, what does personal development mean to you as a term, as a concept?
Personal development means to me it's curiosity. I think the idea of changing who you are fundamentally through personal development, can be not as helpful as joining the conversation, as being curious. So for me, it's about developing the muscles of questioning, of thinking, of looking at things the new way.
That's fantastic. The phrase that came to mind was the phrase joyous exploration,
Oh,
which is,
yeah.
I love that phrase. It's exactly what you were talking about, just expressed
Mhm.
in that sense. If you could say go back in time and meet your 18-year-old self, what's the one piece of advice you would give her?
Oh, I would tell her it's okay to play. Um, 18-year-old me would have loved to hear that it was okay not to know that everything needed to be mapped out, that I could figure some things out on the fly. Um, yeah, 18-year-old me would have loved to know that that was actually okay.
I suppose you were the analytical type then. So you wanted to really know what was going
I
on.
I had just worked very hard. I was the first in my family to graduate college. So I had
Right.
worked very hard. And then I'd hit that milestone, and then it was, oh, but now what? And I was a little paralyzed because I didn't have a model. I didn't. So no, not analytical. I mean, I then went to bartending because I was sort of like a paralysis, analysis paralysis. And to know that that was actually okay, and I didn't have to apologize for that, that I
Sure.
was taking the time that I needed. 18-year-old me would have loved to know that.
And if you could wave a magic wand and change
Mm.
something in the world as it is today,
Oh,
what would you change?
well, I'm American, so a lot of things. Um,
You only have one, I'm afraid.
I know. Today, this week is a very tough week to be asking me this question because we're going through such major societal upheaval here. And I wish, and this is going to sound trite maybe, but I wish that we could understand each other better. If we had the magic wand to even attempt to understand where the other people are coming from on both sides, I think it could help. I don't think it would solve anything, but I think it could help. Um, that would be a tough one for me. But yeah, for humans to have the ability to understand each other. Oh yeah, it's a rough one this week.
And just I will just put that in context for people in the future that might be listening to this, and they're
Yes.
saying, "Well, what do you refer about the societal things in America?" Just for the listener of 2039 that
for the
doesn't know what happened this week.
for the listeners in the future, our president, who has been voted out, is refusing to concede power, and there has been a movement to overtake the government.
Interesting times. It actually there's so much going in the world. I'm not
Mhm.
sure what else can be that I would say, oh, that's a surprise. I mean,
No.
I think we're about to have lots of surprises one after the other with what's going on because things are changing and
Absolutely.
sometimes it feels like it's a snowball and things will
Hmm.
change more and more until something happens.
Right. I mean, that's the history of humanity, right? I mean, every time we think, oh, well, that could never happen. Of course it happens.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
we grow and we revert and we change and we unchange. It is just sort of the magic of our species.
yes. The magic of life, yes.
Yeah.
If you were to give to the listener, based on the conversation we had,
Mhm.
one actionable item, what would you recommend?
One actionable item. I would genuinely recommend that they sit with themselves for 5 minutes. It doesn't have to be a huge commitment, and decide what their priorities are, their values. And they can keep it to, 3 or 4, but attempting as much as they possibly can to divorce themselves from other people's expectations, to allow themselves to just truly look inside themselves and say what they value, what they want to prioritize in their life, and to write it down and to look at it and to remind themselves that everything that they're doing in their life should honor one of those. And if it doesn't, maybe it needs to be re-examined.
Absolutely. Do you want to share with us about how can people find out more about you, connect with you, and the ways that you help them with their careers or
Absolutely.
the
They can
careers
find,
change.
yeah, absolutely. And they can find me at ebsanders.com. And all of my information is there. I've got a ton of free resources. And you'll see some language on there about career change with confidence. And I mean, both the pivoting into a completely new role and also making changes in your career to make it the career you want it to be. We spend an inordinate amount of our lives in our vocations. I feel that, they really should be meaningful and they should be fulfilling to you. So that is the work that I do with my people. And yes, please do reach out. Please do find me. Email me, ebs@ebsanders.com. I love having conversations with people about this and getting their take on it as well. So I would love to hear from your audience.
Mm-hmm. It's so important, and it's a great service that you offer, because you indeed, as you said, we spend so much of our life doing our career. Might as well spend it meaningfully rather than doing it for the sake of other reasons. Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, until there's a time where we're not, changing labor for money, like it's a thing we're going to need to deal with. And I say, make it enjoyable, make it fun, make it impactful.
Is there anything that you were hoping I would ask you today and I completely missed it?
No, I think we've sort of talked about everything. You're bringing up the word, the joyful exploration. Mm-hmm. That's really sort of the backbone of everything about being your authentic self, I think. So I think so much of us as adults, we forget that we can come from a point of ease and a point of play. And for me, a question I've started to ask myself as an adult, which is very new for me, is, well, what if it was easy? What if it was fun? When I'm coming up with something for my career, for my life, for a family issue, well, what if it was easy? And just allowing myself to think, what would the outcome be? What would it look like? What would the solving look like? And allowing ourselves as adults to visualize our problems, our careers, our lives as kind of a big sandbox that we're playing in, and let ourselves play, because our brains crave it. And like you said, excellence can come from it.
Yeah. And many of us have forgotten how to do it and take life way too seriously for what it is. So that's a very important message, AB. I want to thank you very much for this conversation, for your time. I think there were some very important, valuable items in there. I want to wish you all the very best with your career and your life. Any parting words?
No, just thank you. You ask such thoughtful, insightful questions, and the work you're doing is really important, and I'm so glad that you're doing it.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe and rate Personal Development Mastery on Apple Podcasts, and also share this episode with someone who you think will benefit from it. If you want to become part of an exclusive community, gain access to unique content, and at the same time support this podcast, then become my patron. The link is in the show notes, or you can type bit.ly/pdmpat. If you want to know more about what I do and how I can help you, join my Facebook group Personal Development Mastery. Again, the link is in the show notes, or you can simply type bit.ly/pdmgroup. And until next time, stand out, don't fit in,